My name is Clara Hensley, and 5 years ago, my parents threw me out into a blizzard for loving the wrong man. I walked away with nothing but a duffel bag and a shattered heart. No home, no family, no future. They thought I'd crawl back, but instead, I rose from the storm they created. I built a new life, a new name, and when fate turned, they ended up begging me for mercy. This is the story of how I turned their rejection into my revenge. Where are you watching from? Don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories like this. 5 years ago, I stood outside my parents' house in Fargo, North Dakota. The snow falling in heavy, silent flakes while their words cut through me deeper than the freezing wind. Don't come back here ever again, my mother said, her tone cold, final. I was 20 then, stubborn, in love with a man they despised. And that night, I walked away. My boots crunched through the snow as my heart broke under the weight of betrayal. They thought I'd fail, that I'd come crawling back, begging for forgiveness. But I didn't. That night didn't destroy me. It reshaped me. It forced me to fight harder than I ever thought I could. Their rejection was just the beginning. Lies, heartbreak, and a blizzard that almost took my life came after. Yet somehow I survived. 5 years later, they wish they'd never said those words. Stick around to hear how I turned their cruelty into my strength and how they paid for pushing me away. And if you've ever been betrayed by your own family, tell me where you're watching from in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe. Growing up in Fargo, I always felt like I was living in my older sister's shadow. Miranda, perfect, composed, adored, could do no wrong. My parents, Helen and Martin Hensley, ran our middle-class home like a small kingdom of control. Mom, with her crisp voice and endless expectations, wanted both her daughters to climb the social ladder. High degrees, perfect marriages, an image that matched her ambition. Dad was quieter, but his silence was complicity. Every nod from him meant agreement. Every sigh meant disappointment. Their dream daughter was someone they could parade at church and brag about to their friends. But that was never me. I was Clara, the one who didn't fit their mold. At 29, Miranda had already checked all their boxes. A law degree, a fiancé from an old money family, and a position at a prestigious firm downtown. Mom would beam, saying, "Your sister's always known how to make good choices." Her tone sugar-coated, but meant to sting. And there I'd be, sitting across the dinner table, invisible. Every achievement of mine, every A-, every part-time job, every attempt to carve my own path was compared to Miranda's success. "You need to focus, Clara," Dad would say, his voice low but sharp. I tried, but it was never enough. Their approval was a finish line that moved every time I got close. High school became my rebellion. I sought freedom in small acts, sneaking out to local coffee shops, painting murals with friends, staying out late at music bars on Main Street. That's where I met Ethan Cole, 24, a mechanic with rough hands and a smile that made my world stop. Ethan worked at a small garage on the edge of town, fixing old trucks by day and dreaming of opening his own auto shop by night. He didn't have a fancy degree or polished manners, but he had something my family never offered, warmth. We'd sit in his old blue Chevy by the Red River, drinking hot cocoa, talking about everything. With Ethan, I wasn't competing with Miranda. I was just me. When I told my mom about him, her face turned to ice. "A mechanic?" she said sharply. "Clara, you're meant for better than that." Dad didn't argue. He just frowned, disappointment etched in every line of his face. They tried to distract me with dinner parties and family gatherings where Miranda's fiancé, Jonathan, would talk about his investments and charity boards. I'd sit there, a ghost in my own family, listening to Mom gush over their power couple. When I defended Ethan, saying he was ambitious and kind, Mom laughed bitterly. "He's beneath you," she snapped. That night, I cried until my chest ached. Miranda tried to be diplomatic. She always did. They just want what's best for you, she told me gently. But I could see the truth in her eyes. She wasn't defending me. She was protecting herself from losing their approval. Ethan became my escape. After my shifts at a downtown cafe, I'd meet him at his apartment above the auto shop. It wasn't much, peeling paint, drafty windows, the smell of engine grease everywhere, but it was home. A small, messy kind of happiness. The more I stayed with Ethan, the more distant I became from my parents. Phone calls turned to arguments. Dinners turned to interrogations. Then one evening, I overheard them whispering in the living room. "She's throwing her future away." Mom hissed, "That boy's bad news." Dad muttered. I froze at the doorway, their words pressing against my chest like a vice. By 20, I was done. I wanted a life of my own, one built on love, not judgment. I packed a bag, stuffed it with a few clothes and a dream, and told Ethan I was moving in. He looked at me, eyes wide, hopeful. "Are you sure?" "Yes," I said, and I meant it. But secrets in Fargo don't stay buried for long. A week later, a woman from my mom's church saw me carrying boxes into Ethan's place. By evening, Mom knew. That night, the Hensley house turned into a battlefield. Mom stood at the kitchen counter, her lips tight, eyes blazing. "You're living with that mechanic?" she demanded. I froze mid-bite at dinner, the tension thick enough to choke on. Dad set down his fork, his voice low but fierce. "Clara, is it true?" I nodded, and that single gesture shattered everything. The argument exploded, words like knives flying across the table. "You're humiliating us." Mom yelled. "You think that's love? He'll drag you down." I fired back, trembling but defiant. "You don't even know him." Dad slammed his palm on the table. "Enough. Embarrassment. That's all they cared about. Not my happiness, not love. Their reputation mattered more than their daughter." Miranda sat silently, her hands clasped in her lap, not daring to intervene. Mom pointed at the door. "If you walk out with him, you're no longer our daughter. Don't ever come back." Dad didn't stop her. He just looked at me with quiet resignation. Something inside me broke, but not in the way they expected. "Fine," I said, voice shaking but strong. "I don't need you." I grabbed my duffel bag, tears blurring my vision as I stormed to the hallway. Miranda followed me, whispering, "Clara, please, just apologize." I shook my head. "They don't want me. They want someone I'll never be." Then I walked out into the storm. The cold slapped my face the moment I stepped outside. Snow clung to my hair and lashes. The house behind me glowed with warm light, but I didn't look back. I kept walking through the white haze down the quiet street, my boots crunching over fresh snow. Each step was freedom. Each breath burned with heartbreak. I made my way to Ethan's apartment, not knowing what awaited me, only that I was finally choosing myself. For a while, it felt like the right choice. Living with Ethan was chaos and comfort all at once. The little apartment above the garage became our world. We shared instant noodles for dinner, slow dances in the kitchen, laughter that filled the space where loneliness used to be. I got a part-time job at a corner store, while Ethan worked long hours fixing cars. "It's for our future," he'd say, kissing my forehead before leaving. And I believed him. But cracks began to form, small at first, then wider. Late nights, missed calls, whispers on his phone. Then one day, a message appeared in my inbox. No name, no face. "Your boyfriend's not who you think." My stomach twisted as I read it again and again. I told myself it was nothing, some jealous ex, maybe a prank. But the message burrowed into my mind like a splinter I couldn't pull out. That night, as Ethan showered, I open his phone. The lock code was the same as his old truck's plate number, 7249. It unlocked easily. My hands shook as I scrolled. I didn't have to dig far. Messages from a woman named Clara. Her texts were playful, intimate, the kind that belonged to someone who knew his smile too well. Last night was perfect. One read, "Can't wait to see you again." My vision blurred. I dropped the phone on the couch as the shower stopped. My heart raced, torn between fury and heartbreak. Ethan stepped out, his hair damp, wearing that same smile that once felt like home. "What's wrong?" he asked, noticing the look on my face. I held up the phone. "You tell me." He froze, the air between us suddenly sharp and cold. "Clara, it's not what it looks like," he began, his voice soft, but rehearsed. "Then what is it?" I shot back, my voice trembling. "A coworker? A friend you take to dinner? Someone you text about perfect nights?" He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "I didn't mean for it to happen," he muttered. "It was a mistake. A mistake." The word echoed like thunder in my chest. "I gave up everything for you, Ethan," I whispered. "My family. My home. For what? To find out you've been lying to me." He tried to reach for me, but I stepped back. The sight of his hand made my stomach turn. "I can fix this," he pleaded. "Please don't walk away." But I was already grabbing my bag, the same duffel I'd left my parents' house with 5 months ago. History repeating itself in cruel symmetry. "There's nothing left to fix," I said quietly. "You already did enough damage." He followed me to the door, begging me to stay, but I didn't look back. The night air was bitter, snow starting to fall again. A cruel reminder of that first night I'd lost everything. I walked through the empty streets, my boots crunching in rhythm with the thundering of my heart. I had nowhere to go this time. No warm apartment waiting, no family to call. Just me, alone again, with nothing but the cold for company. That winter in Fargo was the harshest in decades. I found temporary refuge at a small 24-hour bus depot downtown, clutching my duffel bag like it was my only lifeline. My phone battery was dying, my hands numb. The storm outside had swallowed the streets whole, snow slamming against the glass walls like angry waves. I hesitated, staring at my contacts list. My parents' number glared back at me. I shouldn't call them. But I was desperate, tired, freezing, and hungry. Maybe after everything, they'd have softened. My thumb hovered for a moment, then pressed call. Mom answered on the second ring. "Clara?" Her voice was tight, distant. "Mom." I breathed, relief and fear mixing in my throat. "It's bad out here. I just need a place to stay." "Don't," she interrupted coldly. "You made your choice. Now live with it." The line went dead. Tears blurred my vision. I tried calling Dad next, praying he'd be different. But when he answered, his words were worse. "Clara, your mother's right. You walked away. You can't keep coming back when things get hard." The call ended with a click that echoed louder than any storm. I sat there, the phone screen glowing faintly in my trembling hands. Around me, strangers pretended not to notice. An old man reading a paper, a young mother rocking a child. But I could feel their pity. I'd never felt so small. Minutes, or maybe hours, passed before a man in a bus driver's uniform approached. His badge read Greg Lane. Mid-40s, kind eyes, a rough face softened by concern. "You all right, miss?" he asked gently. I shook my head, unable to find words. He looked out the window, where the snow was still raging. "Depot's closing soon. You can't stay here all night." "I don't have anywhere to go," I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. Greg nodded, thoughtful. Then he pulled out his keys. "Come on. Let's get you somewhere safe. I know a place." I hesitated. I'd learned by then not to trust too easily, But something in his tone, the quiet steadiness, made me follow. He drove me through near-blinding snow to a small inn on the edge of town, a flickering neon sign glowing through the storm. "They've got cheap rooms," he said, pulling up to the curb. "Tell them Greg sent you." I thanked him, voice cracking, and stepped out into the wind. He didn't wait for a reply, just smiled sadly and drove off, taillights fading into the white. That night, I slept on a creaky mattress in a tiny room that smelled of dust and pine cleaner. I stared at the ceiling until dawn, wondering how many times a person could start over before breaking completely. But when morning came, I knew I couldn't stay there long. I had maybe $200 to my name, barely enough for food and rent. I needed help. That's when I remembered Wendy Myers, my best friend from high school, the one person who had never judged me, even when everyone else did. I texted her, my hands shaking. "Wendy, it's Clara. I need help." Her reply came almost instantly. "Where are you? Come to my apartment. I'll make room." By the next evening, I was standing at her door, suitcase in hand. Wendy pulled me into a hug without a word. Her apartment was small but warm, smelling of coffee and cinnamon candles. She handed me a blanket and a cup of soup, her eyes soft with concern. "What happened?" she asked gently. "Everything," I whispered. "My family. Ethan. All of it." She listened, nodding, not interrupting once. When I finished, she reached into her purse and handed me a small wad of cash, maybe $200. "It's not much," she said, "but it's yours. You'll figure it out. Clara, you always do." For the first time in months, I cried, not from pain, but from gratitude. With Wendy's help, I found a small studio apartment near downtown. It was barely livable, one cracked window, a heater that wheezed more than it worked, but it was mine. I kept my job at the corner store and started taking extra shifts, saving every penny I could. Wendy checked in often, dropping by with takeout and that same bright grin that made the dark days lighter. "You're tougher than you think," she'd remind me. Her faith in me became my anchor. But I wanted more than survival. I wanted purpose. I'd always been good with numbers, so I enrolled in evening accounting classes at a community college. The tuition wasn't cheap, but I used the last of my savings and Wendy's extra cash to cover it. Days turned into months. I'd wake before dawn, work long hours at the store, then rush to night classes. It was exhausting, but each test I passed, each grade I earned, reminded me I was building something real, something that no one could take away again. One evening, my instructor, a stern woman named Mrs. Dalka, handed back a graded quiz with a faint smile. "You've got real potential, Clara," she said softly. "Don't waste it." Her words hit deeper than she could have known, because for the first time since that snowy night 5 years ago, still, ghosts from the past have a way of finding you. A month later, an envelope arrived in my mailbox, my sister Miranda's handwriting neat and careful. Inside was a short letter and $50. "I'm sorry for how things went. I know you don't trust us anymore, but you don't need them. You're stronger than they ever gave you credit for." I read the note twice, tears stinging my eyes. I didn't know if she meant them as our parents or herself. Maybe both. I used the $50 for groceries, but I didn't call her back. I wasn't ready. Not yet. I was finally learning what it meant to live without depending on anyone, not for love, not for approval, not for shelter. Each step I took away from the past brought me closer to the woman I was meant to be. 5 years later, everything had changed. I was no longer that trembling girl who'd stood in a snowstorm with nowhere to go. I'd finished my accounting program with honors and landed a full-time job at a growing finance firm in downtown Fargo. My office overlooked the city skyline, a view that, to me, was proof of every sleepless night and tear I'd shed to get here. My name sat on a small brass plate on my desk, Clara Hensley, Junior Accountant. It wasn't a title of prestige or fame, but it was mine, earned by my hands alone. Wendy had stayed by my side through it all, cheering me on from the sidelines like the sister I never had. And life slowly began to feel steady again. On weekends, I'd meet her at a coffee shop near Broadway, sipping lattes and talking about the future instead of the past. That's where I met Ryan Cole, a high school history teacher with an easy smile and an old soul. Funny thing, he shared the same last name as Ethan, though there was no relation. Fate's little irony. Maybe Ryan was everything Ethan wasn't. Honest, grounded, patient. He listened when I spoke, and when I didn't, he waited. Over time, friendship turned into something more, the kind of love that doesn't demand you to change, but reminds you how far you've come. For the first time in years, I felt at peace. Then, one evening, as I was reviewing client files at work, my phone buzzed. A name I hadn't seen in years flashed across the screen. Miranda. I hesitated, my heart catching in my throat before I finally answered. Clara, she said, her voice trembling. Mom and Dad, they're in trouble. I leaned back in my chair, my pulse quickening. What do you mean? It's Dad's business. He took a loan, a big one, against the house. The bank's threatening foreclosure. They might lose everything. For a moment, I said nothing. The memory of that snowy night, her face behind the frosted window as I walked away, replayed in my mind like an old film. The same parents who told me never to come back were now about to lose their perfect world. Why are you telling me this? I asked quietly. Because they need help, she said, her tone breaking. And you're the only one who can. A bitter laugh escaped me. Me? The disappointment? The failure? I thought they didn't want anything to do with me. Clara, please, Miranda whispered. They were wrong. We all were. You've built something incredible. I know they don't deserve your help, but they're still our parents. I ended the call without promising anything, but that night, as I lay in bed, sleep wouldn't come. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to let karma finish what it started. But another part, the stronger part, wanted something else. Not reconciliation, not forgiveness, justice. The next morning, I went to the bank where my firm handled accounts and requested access to the foreclosure files under my department's corporate client list. I found my father's name easily. The details painted a familiar picture. A second mortgage, unpaid property taxes, and a failed investment into a local housing project. My parents had gambled their pride on status. And lost. I could have paid off their debt right then. I had the savings, but I didn't. Instead, I drafted an anonymous offer through a shell company Wendy helped me register to purchase the debt itself. Within weeks, the ownership of their mortgage quietly transferred to Hensley Holdings, LLC, a name they'd never recognize as mine. It was poetic justice. A month later, they received the notice. Their loan was now owned by a new private lender. If they wanted to keep the house, they'd have to negotiate directly with the company. They called the number listed, and I answered. Good morning, I said smoothly. This is Miss Hensley with Hensley Holdings. There was silence, then a cautious, Hensley? My father's voice, uncertain. Yes, I replied, smiling faintly. How can I help you today, Mr. Hensley? He didn't recognize my tone. Years had changed it, hardened it. He explained the situation, his voice laced with desperation. When he finished, I let the silence stretch before responding. I'm sorry, sir, I said, but your account has been in default for several months. To retain the property, you'll need to make a full repayment or surrender ownership. Please, he said, his voice breaking in a way I'd never heard before. There must be another way. We just need time. My heart pounded, but I stayed composed. We don't extend grace periods for chronic defaults. He sighed, defeated. Could I speak to your supervisor? Maybe they'll understand. You already are, I replied quietly. There was a pause. Then, softly, Clara? The sound of my name in his voice hit like thunder. I didn't answer at first, but when I finally spoke, my words were steady. Yes, Dad. It's me. He didn't speak. I could almost hear him breathing, disbelief turning to shame. You told me not to come back. I continued. So I didn't. But you came to me. Clara, please, he said, his tone trembling now. We made mistakes. We shouldn't have said. You didn't just say it. I cut in. You meant it. And I believed you. He begged then, something I never thought I'd hear from him. Don't do this, Clara. Your mother, she's not well. Losing the house would kill her. The anger in me burned bright, but beneath it was something else, a quiet satisfaction. Not revenge out of cruelty, but closure. The power dynamic had finally shifted. I won't take your house. I said, finally, but you'll sign it over. I'll let you stay in it as long as you live. After that, it's mine. No more pride. No more control. There was silence, then a soft, defeated, all right. When I hung up, I stared at the city skyline outside my window. The snow was falling again, the same way it had that night 5 years ago. Only this time, I wasn't walking away in tears. I was standing tall. Weeks later, I visited the old house. The porch was the same, the windows frosted, the air thick with silence. Mom opened the door, her once proud posture now frail. Her eyes widened when she saw me. Clara, she whispered. I met her gaze, calm and unflinching. I came to sign the papers. Tears filled her eyes, but I didn't step forward. I wasn't there for reconciliation. I was there to finish what they'd started. When the documents were signed, I turned to leave. Mom's voice cracked behind me. We're proud of you, she said softly. I paused for a moment, the words landing like snowflakes, cold, late, and fleeting. Then I walked away, the wind catching my hair as the house faded behind me. I didn't need their pride anymore. I had my peace. Months later, I stood on the balcony of my apartment, watching Fargo's skyline glow beneath the winter moon.